Thank you very much for joining me in this video. You know, it's been 40 years since I moved back to St. Catharines and opened Remax Garden City. And at that time, there were discounters. And when I say discounters, I mean people who are offering $1,000 to the selling broker or offering 1%. We know there's no fixed amount that can be offered. We can't price fix. But we also know that there's a reasonable amount to be earned and something that's way, way below that. And the part that bothers me about it is these, I'll call them discounters. These discounters certainly relish receiving full commission when they sell one of your listings. And in fact, often they use that money to try and buy more business. They'll say, you know, deal with me as a buyer and I'll give you $2,000, but they're only offering $1,000 to the selling office. And so you're paying their marketing. And at that time, back when we used the MLS books, they would have what was offered to the cooperating brokerage, and there was a practice of putting in the commission, whatever it was, and then adding the words or reciprocal. And what they were saying then is we're offering 3% to the selling office or reciprocal. And if you're a discount broker that pays 1%, we're going to pay you 1%. If you're a discount broker that pays $1,000, we're going to pay you $1,000. And I thought that made a lot of sense. You know, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. But the registrar at the time said he would not allow that. Now, there's nothing in the act to prevent it, but the registrar, and I've always found this is pre-RICO, the registrar can kind of make it up as he goes along. And a wise man once said, don't get in a fight with the registrar because you don't have enough money to make his life as miserable as he can make yours for free. Well, today, 40 years later, we still got the discounters. We've got people who are flat rate. We've got people who are 1% realty. We've got people who are even offering $1 to the selling office. And so it's there again. I was talking to a commercial broker friend of mine, and he told me that in commercial real estate, he's starting to see or reciprocal on the compensation, and he said it's not being challenged. It can go through. Now, I'm not saying you should do that, but I thought it was interesting, and I thought that was a move in the right direction if it'll fly. I want to speak for a minute about this $1 being offered, because we're starting to see that. And I think the brokers that do that are on the right track, but they're premature. See, at some point in time, especially in light of these class action lawsuits that buyers are launching against organized real estate, saying they never had any input in how much commission was being paid on their behalf, pay $1 resolves that. But it only works once the banks get on side and the buyers pay the commission to their buyer representatives. Very much like a high ratio mortgage where the insurance fee is built right into the mortgage. And the public doesn't care too much. They want the mortgage in place, and they have to pay back more than they borrowed, and that's just the facts of life. The problem is, though, the person who lists it for $1 or lists it for a minimum amount or mere postings or whatever, they say to you, well, negotiate your commission. And so you write it up on the co-op and representation agreement that you want, for argument's sake, 2.5%. The challenge is, what do you have in terms of negotiating power? The registrar and RICO both say you have an obligation to present all offers, and you can't pick and choose what properties you're going to show based on the compensation that's being offered. So you get an obligation to show it, your buyer wants to buy it, they're offering $1 or they're offering 1%, you want more, you write it in the co-op and representation agreement, you present it to the seller, and the seller says, no, I am going to stick with $1. What do? You can't say, well, then I'm not going to present the offer. Or maybe you can. I want you to think about this for a minute. Under TRESA, as you know, they have the open offer process, where at the seller's discretion, they can open it up and they can share the contents of the offer to other people who are submitting offers or to anybody they want to. And RICO and the government has said it's allowable for the buyer to opt out of this, and he can put a clause in that says in the event that these offers become open and the seller elects to share the content of the offer, I hereby withdraw my offer and render it null and void. And they say that's acceptable. So I'm suggesting that the same thing can be done here. You can insert a clause, perhaps, that says it's understood that the buyer has agreed that the buyer will compensate the seller or the buyer agent 2.5% plus HST. It is further understood that the compensation shall flow from the proceeds of the sale through the listing brokerage to the cooperating brokerage. In the event the cooperating brokerage commission of 2.5% plus HST is not agreed to, the buyer shall immediately withdraw his offer and render it null and void. So what that means is you can now say to the seller, I'm sorry, if I'm not getting 2.5%, I'm not presenting the offer because I don't have an offer any longer. Now, is that reasonable? It's absolutely reasonable. When you put a buyer under a buyer contract, he agrees to pay you 2.5%, and it says in the buyer contract, in most cases you can get that through the transaction. But it says if you're not getting that through the transaction, you're going to be looking to the buyer to pay it. And we also have a practice in the States that before you do that, you're going to make sure that you inform the buyer and he can decide whether he wants to proceed or not. Well, if you're in the middle of presenting the offer and you find out then that you're not going to get the commission you want, how can he opt out? How can you notify him? By putting that clause in the agreement of purchase and sale. And the other thing that's good about this is this whole business about this class action lawsuit, because buyers don't have any control over the commission they're paying, you put that clause in and the buyer does have control over the commission he's paying. He's saying, I want it to be 2.5%, I want it to flow through the deal, and if it's not that, I'm out. Hope that makes sense. At least it's food for thought. I want to thank you for investing your time and look forward to talking to you again next week.